Good afternoon, and welcome to the on-record portion of the Rockbridge Report. I'm Rosie Purdy. Joining us today is Chairman of the Board of Supervisors, Buster Lewis. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Lewis.
My pleasure.
Now, last Monday, the Board of Supervisors passed a new noise ordinance in town. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's not in town. It's in the county. There had been a Supreme Court case a year or so ago voiding a noise ordinance in Virginia Beach that wasn't sensitive enough to determining exactly how you define noise. And so we were advised that we needed to revise ours and look at it. And there had been some work done a couple of years ago on it because of some noise problems that you'd be familiar with related to student parties in the county. And so we thought, well, this would be a good time, and in fact a necessity. When our county attorney got into the deal, she found that we were indeed it was really pretty well written, and that we would not be in violation of this judgment. So then a woman came in saying that there were barking dogs next door that kept her up, and she couldn't get along with her neighbor, and would we do something about that? Well, that didn't last very long, because this is a rural county that depends on agriculture for a lot of its income. And I had a sheep farmer, for instance, come to me and say, "Don't you dare mess with that. My dog is trained to bark. That's his job if a coyote comes up in the middle of the night or something." So that didn't go anywhere. And in discussing it, we just firmed up a few little hours and added electronic noise, live noise to electronic noise, which had already been included, and checked with the sheriff. And so we had this public hearing, and a joint committee of citizens, students and citizens, and the administration, Dean Watkins especially, worked to advise on that. And they, I think that the new ordinance is just slightly tightened up, but, and I advised the people there that night that it was due to the good faith and the good work that the community and the students had done together, including the citizens that live in the area, that it wasn't more severe. But I think it was it was a good community effort, frankly. And I think we're all on better communication, better terms, and I don't anticipate any problems or that it's excessive in any way. It does require a permit to have a party, so that there'll be somebody responsible in case noise gets out of hand.
Right, and so what are the specific guidelines that are now implemented due to the ordinance?
I'm not sure I can give you that specifically, but it has to do with certain hours during the week where noise has to stop. I think maybe 11 o'clock during the week, and midnight on weekends, and a permit has to be acquired to have an event, which has to be filed with the sheriff's office, and noise cannot be heard more than 50 feet from a residence, things like that.
Okay, and now you said that overall the community was on board with this new ordinance. Have you gotten any negative feedback?
I haven't had. The citizens were in favor of tightening it up a little bit. The students were not. But I think that what we did was very minor, and I think everybody will get along okay.
And have you noticed, I mean, it's been fairly recent, but have you noticed thus far any positive changes since the ordinance?
No, haven't had any time. There was a Friday night a couple of weeks ago that several people mentioned might have gotten a little out of hand, and that was sort of ominous since it was the Friday night before the hearing on the noise ordinance. But everybody overlooked that as just an unusual situation.
Okay. Now, another big issue within the county right now is the school board budget. Can you give me an update on what's going on there so far?
Basically, the school board is needed to give the county a budget request on a timely basis. We're required by law, the county is, to approve the school budget by May the 1st. We need to hold a public hearing April 21, or we're scheduling one. That means you have to back up 2.5 weeks so that you can have a public advertising in 2 separate weeks of the newspapers for that public hearing. So that put a deadline for us of April 1st to make those decisions. And the schools met last week, sent the county a budget. We considered that along with the rest of our budget, and found that we I have to say, managed our business pretty well. So we were only $17,000 out of sync on $35 million worth of budget. And so that we figure that can be handled one way or another. Then the schools, we had asked to submit a budget not to exceed what they received last year. And instead, they made their considerations and submitted a budget $473,000 more than they received last year. Of course, they've had a awful hard time with fewer dollars coming from Richmond. This composite index, which is a state program that estimates the ability of a county to pay for education, was changed recently to the advantage of Northern Virginia counties and to the disadvantage of rural counties. And so when that happened, we realized that they're in a real tough position, but so are the taxpayers of the county of Rockbridge. And there are lots of other considerations that the county government has to take under advisement in addition to the school's budget. So essentially what happened was that the Board of Supervisors decided to advertise for public hearing. This is not a finalized budget, but to advertise for public hearing when the public will have the right to speak to it and the responsibility. A budget that flat funded the schools, meaning giving them the same amount as they had last year. We had also to estimate what would be the tax ramifications, and we are advertising that the real estate tax will not increase this year. And then we advertised up to $1 increase in the personal property tax, which is on cars and trucks, personal property like that. And we didn't know at the time what that would produce. It turns out it produced quite a lot. So I don't know that we'll be going that far, but that's an option out there to be decided after the public hearing when the budget is actually adopted.
Okay, and now when you're making your decision as to how to deal with the deficit, is the Board of Supervisors taking more into account public opinion and the general feeling towards the budget, or are you more concerned with what makes sense financially?
Well, you have to do both. You know, you're elected to represent your constituents, and you have to be very sensitive to that. I mean, they put you there, they're your bosses, and sometimes we might do a better job of educating the public as to the realities of fiscal management. But we do have a fiduciary responsibility to watch the funds, watch the ability of the county of county citizens to pay for programs. And there's an awful lot of public opinion that says, don't you touch my taxes. I mean, that's the general feeling. Right. You've had this year people actually saying, please raise my taxes and do more for public education. So we listen to all of that, of course. Right.
And what option are you hoping that is going to take place with this? What are you hoping for?
I think I'm beyond hope. I'm here at the point where we'll just have to see how it works. I was surprised that the schools brought to us the budget they did, and I'm not sure it was wise. And I think had they brought a different budget to us, with maybe a different approach, they would have felt a lot more cooperation from the board, and we might have come up with some extra funds for certain things. As I've said earlier, and much earlier, if you ask for more money without making some really hard decisions that are staring you in the face, then I'm not sure that you have, that the only option is to raise taxes and provide more money. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's where that's my point of view.
So no matter what, it's going to have to be a compromise between the school board and the Board of Supervisors.
It will have to, yes, or not. I mean, you know, the die may be cast, but it isn't necessarily. And I would never predict what's going to happen.
Okay. Now, last Monday, the Board of Supervisors had a work session. When was that planned?
That was planned at the previous meeting of the board on the 23rd, I believe, at our regular meeting. And this is interesting, because one of the things we're being accused of is holding an improper meeting and taking a vote inappropriately. This meeting on a Monday was a continued meeting, which means that it's legally approved, opened and approved and operating from the previous meeting, and just continued. You don't have to reopen it necessarily. It's just automatically a continuation. So there's very clear that the meeting was legal. Whether it was a work session or not is immaterial. It was a public meeting, as all of our meetings are. We believe in operating in the sunshine. And we're very sensitive to the freedom of information, very sensitive. And so, you know, I don't get too excited about being accused of doing something inappropriate. It's just not the case. Go ahead, excuse me, go ahead.
No, so where did this public reaction to this meeting come from? Were you surprised to hear about it?
I was a little surprised. It came from, well, a member of this task force that's been established for the improvement of schools. The gentleman who has raised the issue is a wonderful, wonderful person who I've come to know. His civic experience is in New Jersey. He was chair of an arts commission, and so he's basing his experience on that experience, which is fine, except but he's drawn some conclusions that don't apply in Virginia. You know, Virginia, it runs its own operation, and we have a lot of laws that came out of the Byrd machine, where you want to think things were organized. Everything was done behind closed doors and decided. We had judges. Judges were appointed by the legislature. School board trustee electoral boards were appointed by the judge. I served on that earlier in this county. And then the school board, the trustee electoral board appointed the school board members. They were not elected, and they weren't responsible to to anybody but the machine, so to speak. So we've come a long way.
Okay, and so has anything new been discussed or any new issues raised during that work session?
This session was, no, it was specifically, the purpose of it was, thank you for bringing me back to your question, was to establish a budget to advertise, to take to public hearing. That was our purpose for being there. So to say that we shouldn't have taken a vote to establish a budget to take to public hearing means that there's just some misunderstanding, because that was actually the purpose of the meeting. And I just read in the newspaper yesterday from Augusta County, they had a meeting, made some of those decisions, and they're having 2 more meetings before they get to the school budget. But it's clearly the way government operates in Virginia. Now, we could have allowed public comment at that meeting, but we weren't required to, because it was not an advertised public hearing. And may I go on?
Oh, well,
no, go ahead.
Actually, that's all the time we have for today, but thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for joining us for the on-record portion of the Rockbridge Report. I'm Rosie Purdy. Have a good night.